Welcome to Mormon Book Reviews, where an evangelical encounters the restoration. I'm your host, Steven Pynakker, and I'm very excited to have back on the program. We got the band back together today, folks. Got Mormons with the Murph, and we got Gustavo of Hernandez. Welcome to the program, gentlemen.
Thanks for inviting us, Steve. It'll be fun to
Yeah,
collaborate again.
Yes, it
thanks for the
always is.
invitation.
And it's always fun. And here we go. I just want to make sure to remind people that Stephen Murphy has the channel Mormonism with the Murph, and he does some great work. And how long have you been doing this for now? Has it been 2 years, 3 years?
2.5 years. So started back in July of 2022. So 2.5 years going.
Oh, look, and even here, I'm back, health date and plans for 2025. So I think that's kind of in our wheelhouse of what we want to talk about. And then we have Viajes, Viajes de Fe. Is that, or say, maybe give me the proper pronunciation, Gustavo.
Yeah, in fact, that's pretty close to Viajes F.
Okay, Viajes de Fe. Okay. And how long have you been doing your channel now for?
It's almost 2 years. I started in May, I believe.
Oh, wow. Okay. And so we got your YouTube channel here. And of course, it's a Spanish language channel. And what you're doing is I originally referred to you as the Mormonism of the Murph of Mexico. And I also refer to the Murph as the Steve Pynakker of England. So that's how we're all tied in. And last but not least, there's me. Oh, I got a YouTube channel too. And check it out if you haven't, if you're watching this on another platform. Mormon Book Reviews. I've been doing this for over 3 years now, and it's been quite a journey. So that's what brings us in common is that we're all three YouTubers. We're fascinated by Mormon history, um, the Mormon story in general, and throughout our period of time of doing our channels now, we've had a lot of experiences, and many of them have been very good. But also, there's been all of us in the past year or so have had suffered some issues with maybe a little bit of depression or personal setbacks, maybe even setbacks with our channels. And I just wanted to kind of us have a conversation. A few weeks ago, the Murph and I were having a conversation about this. I said, you know, when you're having long, we like to get on Facebook Messenger and do video calls like every now and then and just have these great conversations with each other. And I said, you know what? This sounds like this would be a good episode for our audience. I think it's really important that, a lot of people are suffering. A lot of people are going through faith crises as well. And we hear from them. And many of them reach out to us because they're going through a faith crisis, because they're reading things about history that they hadn't heard before, or they're hearing them on our programs, and they maybe want to get advice. But we also want to let you know that as hosts of programs, we go through tough times too. Over the course of the last year, a little over a year, we've had Mom and I've had some struggles. Mom broke her hip uh, late last year in November, and she's pretty much pretty recovered. She's still walking with a cane, but she can drive her car and go to the store, so she's doing better. But then last April, I woke up one morning with loud ringing in my right ear, and I had what would later find out I had hearing loss and hypoacusis with tinnitus. And essentially, between that condition, and I was bedridden for like a month, I had to stay in my bedroom because I was so sensitive to sound that I couldn't even be in the living room of my house if my neighbor's air conditioner kicked on. That's how difficult it was to go through what I was going through. We believe that it was caused by a autoimmune condition. I've had some blood work done, but it's quite a mystery. But basically, I just have constant loud ringing in this ear, and I've habituated to the point that I was able to start taping again. Of course, then we had three hurricanes come through as well. So basically, last year, basically 2.5 months worth of programming did not happen as a result of these things that were happening. But also, I think it was helpful because it really kind of puts you, when you're lying in bed, you're bedridden, and you're kind of like, wow, like my life is changing. Will I be able to do a podcast anymore? Will I be able to go out in public anymore? Will I have a social life? I mean, these are, what kind of quality of life am I looking at? Um, and even then, I still had peace, that like, and it kind of gave me like, okay, the priority is sometimes people who are in this space put so much into their channel and what they're doing is sometimes they lose track of the important things like their mental health, their physical health, their familial relations, all these kind of things. And so all three of us have kind of gone through challenges over the course of the past year. And I thought it was important to just kind of have this conversation today. Now, normally I don't talk this much at the beginning, but I wanted to give some perspective. Um, Murph, I wanted to maybe just start with you. And I've had a series of conversations over the course of the last year where you've been going through some difficult times and struggles. And I just want to know, and for you, you've even taken some time off producing content as well to take a mental health break on this as well. Maybe just talk about what you've been, give us kind of a broad overview of kind of what you've been going through, what your struggles have been, and how you've been able to, in some ways, overcome them, or sometimes, or maybe still battling these things too.
Yeah, I'd say I'm probably still in the camp of still trying to deal with it and battle. So by no means do I feel like I've come over on the other side. I think all of us have some things in common that we've all similarly had some mental health struggles in the past, and we've all gone through some sort of a faith crisis, whether or not we lost our faith completely. Um, and for me, I struggled with anxiety a lot in my teenage years whenever I was going through bullying and other things. And then I felt like I sort of overcame it, or at least managed a lot of things. Whenever I was on my mission, I saw a lot of missionaries struggle with mental health, stress, homesickness, depression. I know, Gustavo, you shared that with me in our interview. And I was very fortunate or blessed that I didn't really struggle much with anxiety or stress or homesickness as a missionary. I had just a wonderful experience. And even in my early 20s, even going through my first faith crisis, I don't think it had a huge mental turmoil effect on me. But really, I think in the last couple of years, there's been things that have been causing me to experience more depression than I ever had before. And in my family, both my parents struggle with depression. I have another family member who has anxiety and depression. I struggle more with the anxiety side, but the depression was just, it was flaring up a little bit more. Whenever I started the channel back in July 22, it was, I think, a really good thing for me because I was sort of back in, I would say, faith crisis again after I'd come back to the church. And I felt the need that I needed to really confront the issues, the doubts, the questions I had. I was reading and consuming a lot of podcasts, and I think I needed some sort of an outlet. And generally, it's been, I think, a really productive way for me to express my thoughts, to sort through some of these topics, to interview different people, and to collaborate and meet great people like yourself, Steve, and Gustavo, and also to meet people who are sort of wrestling and navigating, through some issues as well, to find community as well. And generally, I think the channel has been a great thing for my mental health. I think it's been good generally for my faith as well, to intellectually try to figure out some things. But on the flip side, um, Mormonism is endless. And as you're researching through different topics, there's just so much, and there's so much to read. There's so much research. There's so many articles to try to consume. And then there's so much content that's being produced that you're also trying to stay on top of as well and keep up to date with. And I think I was finding for a while that I was maybe biting off more than I could chew, because I was still working a full-time job while doing this, and I was trying to put up weekly, sometimes 2 videos a week. And I was sort of feeling for a while that, like, this is quite a lot. I'm feeling a bit tired, a bit stressed, starting to feel a little bit of burnout. But then I think, particularly in the last 6 months, a lot of things just kind of happened at once. Things in my personal life, some challenges I was having with personal relationships, some stressful things that happened at work, which some of the details with that, Steve. And I think it really was, I think, the thing that really triggered anxiety and depression quite bad during that time. And it was really hard to keep putting out content. I didn't feel in a good mental space. You can almost sometimes feel the pressure and expectation to keep doing it regularly. And I knew at that time that something had to give. There was just too much externally, but also a lot internally. And it didn't help. I was picking up a lot of colds and flus. I think it's just the time of year, and because I work in a school. And it got to the point where I just needed to take a step back. I was spending too much time on YouTube, too much time trying to engage and keep up to date with all the content being produced. I didn't feel in a good place mentally with just things that were going on in my personal life. And I knew that I just needed to take a step back, that something was going to give. Um, and I think it was good generally for me to slow down, to relax, to detach a little bit from all of the research and everything I was doing. I'm still really passionate about it, but for me, I think there was just too much going on in my mind that I just couldn't handle it all at that time. And since taking a step back, I think it's been good for me. By no means do I feel like the mental health challenges have been resolved. And I still feel this passion to keep going with research and keep doing the channel. But I knew that I need to really slow down because I was coming up with so many different ideas where I could do like a load of debates, and then I could do an LDS discussion response series, and then I want to do a CS ladder series, and then all these things I was looking to do. And it was just, even if I wasn't working full time, I think it was still a little bit too much. I was being a bit over ambitious. So yeah, that's kind of been the process. Generally speaking, I think the channel's been a great thing for my mental health,
Mhm.
but I think I need to change the way I'm approaching it in order to make it sustainable going forward.
And I think, and I'm so glad you brought that up because, one of the things I wanted to do was talk about these things. For a lot of people, they're like, "Oh, Steve, we're so glad that you're doing that. Your ear is doing better." And I'm like, "No, it's not. It's still just as bad, if not worse, than when that morning when I woke up." But I said, "But but I have the tools." Basically from previous PTSD that I've suffered in the past, from a severe depression that's been lifelong, because I went through a lot of those things, this has been something I've been able to, because even when I was lying in bed thinking like I might lose the channel, I might lose everything, I still wasn't, I was like, but this isn't nearly as bad as it was when I was at my lowest point. So so I had something to compare it to. Now, if everything was wonderful in life and everything came easy in my life and I had something like this happen, it would probably be much worse in many ways. So I kind of feel like it's important to talk to people, not after like, oh, and now we have a happy ending and everything's wonderful. It's like, no, that's not life. The reality is life is hard, it's difficult, and it has its challenges. And you think like, oh, look at these people, and listen, I talk to YouTubers and podcasters that are much bigger than me, and trust me, they're suffering too. And in many ways, some of them, because they're so big, almost feel like this burden of responsibility to their audience, and I do on some level as well.
Hmm.
And it can be quite weighing on these people who are, some of the biggest ones that we all know. I have conversations with, and they have the same mental health challenges too. They have, and also, um, it's hard. And Gustavo, we're going to get you in this conversation here too, because I think you really have an important story to tell. Is you, I had one person a couple years ago. I was having breakfast with this pretty prominent um, Mormon podcaster, and he hands me his phone and says, "Here, read this email." I'm reading this email, and it's like this person's like, "You helped change my life. You helped me get through this and this and that and that," and just like it was a very emotional thing. And he went to me and he says, "Steve, when I read this, I don't feel anything." It's like, and I said, I get that because you almost you can't function if you're getting emails like that every day, all the time. After a while, you almost have to detach yourself emotionally from these things for your own mental health. And honestly, a little over a year ago, I would say I was one of those people who was consuming all different content, watching a bunch of YouTubers, listening to podcasts, really throwing myself, staying on top of everything that was going on. But I realized once I was getting some stressors in my personal life, one of the things I did was I had to detach myself as much as I could mentally from that world so that I could just focus on my mental health and everything like that. And Gustavo, I want to bring you into this conversation because, you've been going through some stuff too, and maybe just talk about some of the struggles you've had. And, also a unique thing too is, you're kind of in your own little world because you're a Spanish language channel. And so you probably operate in similar spheres that we do, but also some different ones, and maybe there's some maybe even some challenges operating in that world as well.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I guess all goes back to when I had my first faith crisis. Like Murph, it was stressful, but not too much. Um, I've had mental health struggles, you know, ever since I can remember, but I didn't know what it was until just a few years ago. And, it feels like everything was building up to this year, well, last year, 2024, and things just got out of hand. And while I was creating content, it's not too different from the English sphere. I would say maybe the only difference is that it's a very lonely community, as because there's not a lot of content creators, and the content creators that post, they usually fall more on the far orthodox side. So it was interesting because I felt like half my subscribers uh, were subscribed to just tell me I'm dumb for believing in Mormonism, and the other half were believers who questioned my intentions, sometimes bringing stuff up that could be called controversial is considered, you know, like doubtful, unfaithful, and things like that.
You know, Gustavo, I'm so glad you brought that up because a lot of stuff that's out there about the new Mormon history, about the all these other things, the controversies haven't made their way into the Spanish language world. So you're kind of bringing this stuff up that maybe a lot of Americans, English speaking Americans, are Latter-day Saints are probably better informed about. And so you're for many of them, they're hearing this stuff for the first time on your platform, which for them might be a little disconcerting.
Yeah, yeah, and to give credit to the other channels, they do talk about those topics,
Okay.
but they usually do it in nah, it doesn't matter,
Uh,
or oh, it's nothing.
mhm.
Uh, but if I pause and say maybe, it wasn't the right thing to do, that's when you get some pushback. And at the beginning of this year, I was sort of dealing with that and some things at home and with work and school. And I just reached a all-time low. I guess you guys were aware of that as well. And and I just didn't know what to do because I've been to therapy, uh, ever since 2016, 9 years ago now. And it was stressful because I was trying to find, a way to move forward, a way to feel any sort of progress, in my mental health. But like everything began to feel repetitive in therapy. I was like, okay, I get what anxiety is. Okay, I get the the physical composition. But how how do I use that? Um, I don't know. Things just didn't work out. I was told, you know, uh, have a healthy diet, do exercise, have a good night's sleep, and things like that. And it, I don't, I never found a way to make that work. And when I did, I didn't feel any difference. So I was very stressed out on that. And as a religious person, um, where you're encouraged to seek comfort from God. And in my case, I guess m my faith struggles and faith crisis have been more on whether God exists or not side rather than Mormonism. So dealing with that, was hard during that year because I was like, okay, so I can also feel peace and comfort from God, from the Spirit. But what does that look like? And people say, oh, I prayed and I feel better. And I was like, I don't know, that's not giving me much to work up. And I was just trying to, you know, come to terms with, I believe in truth claims, but I I still have no idea how, how to seek God on these specific circumstances. So it was a bit of a struggle, and while I was doing that, the list thing I needed back then was just to keep getting, all the comments on the channel. They don't help a lot, and I'm a sensitive guy, so sometimes comments get to me more than the average person. Um, and I was thinking for a while of quitting because I I would also get sometimes either emails or or messages on Facebook, but not positive ones.
Mhm.
It was not how I helped someone. It was how um, yeah, I witnessed people's faiths crumble, and you know, some asked me for help, and I just did a very sloppy job, and they just ended up uh, losing their faith, and I just kept thinking that I don't know that I couldn't really do anything, or that it wasn't worth anything I was doing, or I couldn't help people even feel better, even regardless of what where their faith was at. I feel like I couldn't really help, and that's what I wanted to do, to just help. And if I couldn't do that, then what was the purpose? And I dealt with that, and I decided to keep the channel because it has ever since the beginning it has been helpful for me to study and things like that, like you described, Steve, when you were younger, and you said like reading about Mormonism sort of kept you going for a while, and it was sort of the same for me in the
Yeah.
past few months. So I said, you know what, I can do it, um, and maybe I'll have to detach myself, like you said. And in the past 4 months, I I've sort of taken a break. I mean, I've been uploading, but I've just been like, okay, YouTube Studio, upload video, there you go, and I don't look back. Um, and I've been trying to do some things I've learned from therapy, and I don't really know or understand why. But this time, things that I've been trying for years have been slowly working, little by little. I don't understand really what's the difference between 3 years ago and now, but things have been slowly getting better. It's something that I, something that happened last year is that I, I don't know, because I felt what therapy told me to do wasn't working. I just went on the opposite side and did just the opposite, and I gained a lot of weight. And I remember that in September I said, "Okay, I'll I'll just try to take care of this." And this week, I finally I got down 40 pounds from September to now,
Wow.
and and it's exciting. I don't understand why it wasn't exciting before, but it is now. Um, physically, I feel better. Um, I was, I was having my semester finals in school in December, so I didn't have time to edit my videos, so I haven't uploaded since December. I'll resume this week. But because I haven't uploaded, I also realized that I felt more peaceful.
Okay.
I'm so I it's like you said, Murph. I want to go back, and I'm already planning on some things I want to do. But I realized that it had to be different than what I was doing before. I still have to maybe figure out exactly what changes I'll make on the channel or in content creation. But I just want to say that, like Murph, I still feel I have a long way to go. Um, I don't see, I don't know, maybe I don't see this getting all sorted out in the near future, but I feel like at least I'm one step ahead or one step at a time. And maybe last thing I want to say is that I I you know what's the word they use? I extend grace to anyone who's felt you know mental health struggles, and even people who have struggled with their faith. It can be through maybe learning about church history, or maybe some traumatic experiences with clergy or with people in church, or things like that. Because even though I haven't experienced those things myself, and at least for me, going to church and things like that um, has been really helpful. That's what keeps me going most of the time. I'm a Sunday school teacher now, and an institute teacher, and it's exciting to talk to people. It's exciting to just try to help. So for me, it has worked. For me, my struggles have little to do with Mormonism itself, but I I get the feeling of hopelessness, of loneliness, of darkness, even feeling silence from the heavens and things like that. So even though it comes through different circumstances, I get the feeling. And in the past month, no, in the past 3 months, I've been able to just relax when it comes to religious beliefs. I've been visiting many churches, and I've been making friends in those churches, and it's been fun to make videos about that. And lately I've been listening to, on the believer side, to Don and Jasmine Bradley, Jim Bennett. And what I like about those guys is that they're believers, but they're not stressed out about about it. Um, and I appreciate that. I think that, like some people say, that that's my brand of Mormonism,
Okay.
to work with what I have. I'm a believer. I'm a proud believer. But I'm just way more relaxed about things, and
Mm.
I just feel comfortable in the space I'm right now. I'll just try to keep working, but it's been quite a year.
Yes, yes. Well, I'm just so glad that you're in a better space now than you were. And you mentioned how your faith has helped you. Murph, I want to know, how has your faith been helping you through this process?
Oh, that's a good question. I think I think there's times where I've had some, I would say, faith challenges. I think it's all like interconnected. I think so. It's not just you're having faith struggles and that's the cause of your mental health. It's other things going on. They're all interconnected, but um, it it can be another thing sort of on top of you when you're having faith challenges. And over the past few years, like I've wrestled between belief and unbelief, and this time probably more times feeling agnostic or full on atheism. So like Gustavo, there's been times where I've been wrestling with God and wrestling with my spiritual experiences because I feel that some of my spiritual experiences have been very connected to Mormonism or to our scripture and doctrine. And yeah, there's been so many times where you think about your past experiences or your beliefs and the different ways that you can approach them. For me personally, I remember I listened to a video that I think Jacob Hansen put out on Thoughtful Faith, and I can't remember what it was called, but it was almost like a practical argument for God or for religion. And I actually appreciated the video. He put up a post of someone who was asked, I think it was by their child, like, Dad, what if all of this isn't true? And what if we're just devoting and dedicating our lives to this? And what if it's all not true? And that's certainly a question that I have wrestled with a lot as someone who is a doubter. And he talked about in his response that, well, if it's all not true, I believed in something that has given me hope and peace and purpose, or I believed in a Jesus who I felt tremendous peace and love for, and who gave me strength, even if it wasn't real, or it motivated me to become a better husband, a better person, motivated me to serve. Sort of listing all of these positive fruits that even if it wasn't true, look at all these positives that it's brought into my life. And I know it's not a very compelling argument for a skeptic or an unbeliever. They might just think like, "Oh, you're just believing because it brings good things in your life." But when you feel you might be a bit torn between belief and unbelief, and you can see the two paths, for me, as I've reflected on the blessings and the good that my faith has brought in my life, how it's helped me to be a better, more Christ-like person, how it's just filled me with peace and hope and enthusiasm. Um, that is one thing that has helped me. It's not always a 50-50. It's not always that there's equal evidence on both sides. And as you're continuing to research, you might find some things that go on the positive side to support faith, be it in God or in the divinity of Jesus Christ and in the New Testament, Book of Mormon, Joseph Smith, but you'll encounter some challenging arguments going against as well. But I have found that for me, I have found peace in my faith. And I think in this time, slowing down and going back, spending more time with prayer, with pondering, with meditation, with reflecting over my past spiritual experiences. And there's way more complexity because up until I was 21, I 100% knew the church was true, the gospel was true. There wasn't really any doubts at all, and everything was beautiful. And now you're dealing with complexity with religious organizations, challenges leveled against truth claims, things that call into question your spiritual experiences, and you can see the naturalistic theories. I can't remember what my final thought was going to be, but I would say that choosing choosing to believe and trust in those experiences has brought me more peace and has brought a light into my life. I would say, and for me, it's very difficult to be constantly wrestling back and forth. As the scriptures say, to be tossed to and fro by every wind of doctrine. And in modern speech, it's like being tossed to and fro by every latest argument or piece of evidence or every latest podcast that you listen to. You don't want to be closed-minded and be like, I believe and nothing will convince me. But it can be really hard if you're so open-minded to that you're constantly fluctuating depending on what you're listening to or consuming. And at some point, you kind of have to decide, do I believe in this or not spiritually? Do I trust my spiritual experiences? Do I believe there is a God? Do I believe that Jesus Christ is divine? Do I believe in the Book of Mormon and the prophet Joseph Smith? And yes, I want to keep studying, keep researching. And if I feel like one scale over tips, then I would be open. But I don't want to live my life constantly wrestling and second guessing faith or not, because you kind of have to live your life, and it's you can't really live your life if you're either completely stuck in the middle or you're wrestling back and forth. That's not good mentally for people, and I can understand because I have family members who know I do the channel, and they've left the church, and they've said to me, I don't really want to engage with your content because I don't want to be wrestling back and forth. I don't want to
Mm,
get back in the space of finding things to support maybe the
okay.
truth claims of the church or evidence to support Jesus being a prophet. They feel like I've sort of done my research, I've reached my conclusion, I'm going to live my life out of the church. And while I've maybe in the past been a bit critical, like, oh, you're not being open minded, you should explore as much evidence as we can, I can understand that because
Yeah.
it can be challenging fluctuating back and
I
forth.
actually I think too, Murph, one of the things I tell people I'm a pro-atheist evangelical. And when I say that, there are some people that have been so hurt by religious and spiritual abuse that even the concept of God they find triggering. And so I got to be respectful of people of where they're at. And so that's why I don't try to say, well, don't be an atheist. Like I'm more like, I understand why you're an atheist because you almost have to go through that process, which I was an atheist for 13 years as well, and just Gustavo, just talking about some of like, sometimes you feel like the distance, like there's a coldness there that whether there's a God or not, you're not hearing from him. What's so fascinating is that that's exactly what Mother Teresa was saying in her diaries after her death. She felt that exact same thing. And so it's not, and you would think, oh, here's a spiritual giant. Here's somebody who, is this really important religious figure. And she faced the same uh, doubts that you did, says, faced the same pain of not hearing from God throughout her life. And so we can see that this is a very human thing. This is can be a universal thing as well. And so I think it's really important. And also, folks, does a lot of this sound familiar? Um, you've been going through, many of you have been going through these very same doubts. That's why I want to have this conversation. Or you're going through depression, maybe has nothing to do with your religion or your faith. It could be any number of things, but also think it's really important. Now, this is an episode that probably won't get huge amount of views because people don't really like talking about this kind of stuff. But I really feel like it's important for us to have this conversation while we're still going through stuff as well. And just real quick too, for the both of you, I meant to tell you this before we did the interview, but this is really a three-way conversation. So I know I've been asking all the questions, but Gustavo or Murph, if you have any questions for each other or for me or any comments you want to do, I just want to open up the floor and we can chat through this. Either one of you have something to say or ask?
Yeah, well, I think if I were just give sort of like my final thoughts, and this is sort
Okay,
of advice or encouragement
sure.
to myself as well as to others, because I think mental health challenges, they may not be related to your faith. They could be so many other factors, and something that I learned about myself is that I can find social media quite addictive. And it was getting to the point where I felt like I was trying to consume so much on YouTube, so many videos and podcasts to the point where it was hard to switch off or to just just go for a walk or just like think or just have time to yourself. And I think while social media is a great thing, I think YouTube's a great thing. It's a great tool. There's so many great resources on it. I have found trying to take a step back, or if I'm going to watch something, I'm doing it intentionally. It's almost like I am being an agent to act, but there's times where you can feel like you just go on your phone and you go through social media feeds or you go on YouTube because you're constantly wanting to consume something or be entertained. And at least for me, if I do that, um, if I do that too much, it starts to have negative impacts on my productivity and how I'm feeling mentally. I can start to feel demotivated, and I think like if there's some people who are struggling with their mental health, I think taking a little bit of a step back from social media or watching loads of videos can be a good thing, and trying to establish better habits. The days where I felt the best have been when I've sort of woken up early. I've been trying to do, reading in the morning, study, trying to go to the gym, do a bit of exercise, trying to eat healthier, trying to do productive things and not consuming so much time on social media or technology or whatever, but trying to have a bit of a balance doesn't solve your mental health challenges, but I think it makes it easier. And that's something that I need to try to be more diligent at and finding a good balance. But that's what I would say to people is if you're spending all day, if you're struggling mentally, and or if you're really wrestling in a faith crisis, but you're spending all day just on YouTube or whatever it might
Yeah.
be, probably just for your own mental health, just take a step back, whether or not you believe or not from a practical point of view.
It's funny because ever since about a month or so before the election, I started listening to Chicago sports talk radio on my on one of my apps to listen just to get my mind off of things. And I even tell people like, when I was on Mormon Stories, I talked about how Mormonism saved my life. I There's another story that I also want to tell is that how also listening to Chicago sports talk radio actually helped save my life, keep me grounded as well. And so
Oh
as
yeah,
exactly. So for me, that's a tool that I found that's been helpful. Like, okay, just listen to something completely, detached from this world, and you can kind of get plugged in about the Chicago Bears, the big game coming this Sunday, right? And for me, that's been helpful just to kind of, especially even with the election, like there was just so much stuff going on. It's like I gotta completely unplug myself from this world. Otherwise, it's just too much. And that's the other thing too is like, taking a walk. I'm trying to take a walk every day. Getting out there and just taking a walk, getting out of bed and taking a walk, that can be a victory, right? Even just those little things, every day can be a challenge. There are some days where maybe you don't feel like getting out of bed, and I get that too. I've been there, and I
and
think it's
I think I would just say as well that I feel like I have a lot more empathy and understanding of those
yes,
people who have
yeah,
real mental health issues or who are struggling with severe depression, suicidal ideation. I feel like I get it, and that there needs to be, I think, just more empathy and compassion because there's times where you can feel like you're mentally suffering just as you can physically suffer. There are people that can be mentally suffering, and that can be a really hard place to be in as well. And I think that's why we should strive as much as we can, I think, to be kind online or in our comments. Like, yeah, I think
yes,
discussions are good. I even enjoy some debates, but I think sometimes the online space can be so contentious that it's not always good for you mentally as well. And you need to detach. And I think we need to try to be civil and kind and understanding with each other because you don't know what someone's going through
yeah,
behind the scenes.
exactly. Amen to that, my friend. Yeah, and that's the thing is like, and I don't try to get involved in this tit for tats. And as a matter of fact, when somebody starts criticizing me publicly on Facebook, I DM them and say, listen, let's take this conversation offline. I'd rather do that and have a more civil conversation rather than do this public thing display of look at me, I'm taking on Steve. It's so immature and stupid. Gustavo, any questions or comments or anything you want to bring to the table?
Yeah, I've been thinking about what to say, and I think that maybe we can like Steven, some of my final thoughts is that something that comes to mind is something you told me about a year ago, that things sometimes feel like they will last forever, but they don't. And I've had to deal with that the past year, but I think I can confirm that that's the case. To anyone going through hardships, uh, they feel like they last forever, uh, and sometimes thinking of an end can be depressing. But in this case, it's a positive thing.
Mm.
Um, things, you know, even people who have anxiety or depression, I remember that, I've been diagnosed with both anxiety and depression at different stages in my life. And when I talked about some of my, crisis moments, they ask, what did you feel? How long did it last? And even if you have, chronic depression or an anxiety disorder, the things you feel, they can last a day, 12 hours. But even while you're struggling, there can there are breaks. And there's even hope within that. So I think that sometimes I don't know, we are afraid of the implications. Maybe in a faith crisis, I know it will end, but I don't know uh, where I'll be at by the end. I don't know if I'll still have my faith or if I'll lose it. Maybe that's the scary thing,
Mm.
that it will end, but I don't know where I'll be at by that end. I think that's something I think about sometimes, but I just wanted to say that there's hope that uh, these feelings don't last forever, and on the other um, side, there's also a community. Sometimes that community can be friends, family, or sometimes listening to Chicago sports, right?
Hmm.
I think that um, I've learned this throughout the years, but I'm an introvert, so I don't really try to go to parties or things like that. I prefer to stay home, but I've learned about the importance of having, a community, even if that's a couple of people or 100. But it's really important to not be, lonely. I think um, that can be tough, especially when you have mental health struggles. And yeah, I've I've been in the past few months, sometimes I even wake up sobbing and not really understanding why or understanding how I can make it stop or what I can do. Uh, but having a support system, having people I trust, having friends, having family, that can help you, um, even if you don't know when things will start working out. I think that's a good start. And also, thank you guys, both Murph and Steve. You guys helped me, and you were part of that support system. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. We all have each other too. And we've been able to talk through things. And I think it's really important that we, all three of us, keep our communication lines open, especially when we're going through tough times. Like I said, this has been a difficult period of time in my life. It's been not as bad as my deepest lows, but I tell people the first couple years I started the channel, everything landed in my lap. Everything came very easy. The last year has been a real struggle, and it hasn't been easy. I even thought for the first while I was doing, it's like, man, this is just coming too easy for me. To be on the channel for less than a year and you're on Mormon stories, like that's just crazy. To have all that success, and then the past year still having success, but also having a lot of challenges, and things aren't as coming as easy as they did. And I have to work a little bit harder now for things. And I've just realized, like, okay, that's this place that I'm in. Now, so I've told people, I said, God may come to me and say, okay, the season is over for you to do this. And I'd have to say, okay, then I'll just have to move on. I hope that's not going to happen anytime soon, but this has been a tough season. But also, we also remember, so we read the scriptures, it tells us there's a season for all these things. We go through all these seasons, and there's a time and a place for all these things. There's a time for happiness. There's also a time for sorrow. You know, those are places too. That's all part of the human experience. And so I just want to thank both of you for honoring me for having this important conversation. I hope it's helpful to the audience. I hear from people a lot that are going through faith crises and having difficulties. And I just want to let you know that, you can email me at mormonbookreviews@gmail.com. I do like helping people. I'm not a therapist. I'm not qualified, but I also have had life experiences that I think can be helpful to people when they're going through these difficult times. Murph, Gustavo, any final words before we wrap this up?
I just want to say, I think Gustavo made a really good point about reaching out to others. I
Yeah.
think that's really important when you're going through it. I know for myself that when I'm feeling depressed or very low, you tend to withdraw.
Hmm.
And as it says in the scriptures, not good for man to be alone. I'm an introvert as well, but it's good to connect and socialize with others, whether it's virtually, like our relationship, or in person as well. And I would just like to say that thanks so much for having us on, Steve. And I really appreciate our friendship and that you have been there to support me over the past few months as well, being a friend that I could turn to. And I understand that you've had a really difficult year as well with everything you've gone through with your home, with your ear, and appreciate that you're still going at it, motivated, and
Yeah.
um, you're managing through your challenges. And yeah, just thanks so much for having me on.
Yeah, and I just want to say when you go through these things, it actually kind of helps prioritize things like what are really the important things in your life. And sometimes
Yeah,
things that I thought were important a year ago aren't that important to me now when you go through through these struggles. And so actually, I think it can be a clarifying moment of realizing what really is important, and that's relationships and friendships and just having that community. And I'm honored and privileged to have been able to build this community here at MBR throughout the world and hearing from people throughout the world and hearing a lot of different stories from people. And I'm honored and privileged to have spent many hours on the phone or on Zoom calls with people to help them get through some very difficult times. Gustavo, any final words on your part?
Yeah, and this is to anyone who's watching. I know that this being the Switzerland of Mormonism, we have people from all walks of life and from all beliefs. I know that you know right now there are many debates going on online, and there are many beliefs that are being called into question, things like that. So maybe someone watching is really on the polygamy debate or on whether Joseph was sincere or not, and things like that. So uh, I would like to, for anyone who's watching, to just put those things aside for a second. And if you're struggling, uh, whether it's mentally or physically, just wanted to sort of let you know that you're not alone. People care about you, and this episode we do it to talk to each other, but we also just want to sort of let people know that they're not alone, even if we don't know each other personally. I extend a virtual hug and just words of encouragement that things can work out and will be working out.
Okay. Well, I really appreciate it. And those of you, of course, who are suffering, don't hesitate to get help. Go see a therapist, contact or any hotlines that might be there to help you get through difficult times. Um, d don't go and put your skull under a shell and because you can't do this on your own. You do need a support system from people. It's really important that you do that and rely on your family and friends. You'll find out who your real friends are during these difficult times as well, and that can also be a blessing too. Gentlemen, it was a great conversation we had today. Thanks for joining us.
thanks, Steve.
All right. Well, tell us what you think in the comments. We'd love to hear what your thoughts are. Again, don't hesitate to reach out if you'd ever want to have a conversation. I'm there just to talk to people. I do talk to a lot of people that go through some difficult times, and I think it's part of my ministry. I do believe it's part of my ministry to do this kind of stuff as well. I think that's one of the reasons why I think God placed me in this place. Um, okay, this was great. Thanks again for everybody. Remember, this is the most important thing. All the voices of the restoration will be heard here on Mormon Book Reviews.